No one in the saloon noticed her, and that was what hurt the most. Clara served tables barefoot, not by choice but because her shoes had been taken as payment for a debt that never seemed to shrink. The floor was cold in winter, rough in summer, and cruel all the time. Still, she walked with her head down, like someone who had learned too early that drawing attention only brings trouble. Until that night, the wind slammed the door of the Red Dust Saloon, hard enough to silence every conversation. A man stepped inside, too big for the room, too wide for fear, and far too heavy to be ignored. It was Elias Crowe, the owner of the largest ranch in the region, a man known for two things. He never made promises, and he never lost what he considered his. The entire saloon held its breath. Clara felt it before she saw it. The air shifted, the silence thickened. When she finally looked up, he was standing just a few steps away, staring directly at her, not the way other men looked, but the way someone sees. "You're barefoot," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She tried to step back, but no sound came out. There was something in the way he spoke. It wasn't a threat. It was resolve. "I'll pay your debt," Elias continued, low and steady. "All of it." A few nervous laughs echoed in the back. Empty promises were common there, but Elias Crowe was not a man who wasted words. Clara swallowed hard. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. Already expecting the worst, he stepped closer. Just one step, but it was enough to make her world shrink. A home, a family, strong children. He paused, and silence. From the world that broke you, her heart began to race. This wasn't an invitation. It was an agreement that would change everything. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Inside the saloon, Clara realized that by accepting or refusing, she wasn't choosing just a man. She was choosing who she would become from that night on. And the danger, she didn't know it yet, was already listening to every word. Clara didn't answer right away. The entire saloon seemed to be waiting for her. Men who had never lifted a finger to help her now watched, curious like spectators at a dangerous game. Some hoped she would say yes. Others hoped she would be humiliated, as she always had been. And Elias Crowe, he simply waited. No pressure, no rush, like a man who already knew the answer. "I'm not a woman of easy deals," Clara finally said, feeling her own voice tremble. "I've been promised things before." His eyes darkened slightly. "Promises don't pay debt," he replied. "Actions do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. The saloon owner's ledger, the same one where her name appeared over and over again, always beside numbers that grew like chains. Elias placed the notebook on the counter. "How much does she owe?" he asked. The owner choked before answering. It's a lot of money." Elias opened his wallet and laid down enough bills to silence any lie. And a little more. The sound of the money hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot. Clara felt her legs weaken. "From today on," Elias said, never taking his eyes off her, "no one here will speak her name as if she were property." The saloon went silent, but the danger didn't. Across the room, Ralph Mercer, a man with a crooked smile and hands stained with stolen land, watched in silence. Clara's debt had never been just money. It was control, and he didn't like losing anything. "You know what they're saying about you, don't you?" Elias murmured, lower now, only for her to hear, "that a woman alone doesn't last in the valley, that she always ends up paying with her body, or with her life." Clara felt the past rise in her throat. A mother buried far too early. A father killed, trying to defend a piece of land that was never respected. Herself alone, still a child, learning that survival was an everyday act of courage. "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered. "Not yet," Elias replied. "But with me, you won't be taken. You'll be chosen." Outside, thunder began to roll across the horizon. And when Clara took her first step toward the door, at his side, she didn't notice that Mercer was already signaling to two armed men. The deal had been made, but the valley had not yet accepted it. The rain began before they even left the town, heavy, cold, as if the sky itself had decided to wash the valley's sins away that night. Clara walked beside Elias, the borrowed hood barely covering her hair. her feet still feeling the wet ground beneath them. Each step away from the saloon felt like being torn from an entire lifetime, even if that life had never truly been hers. Elias's horse was large, restless. He helped her up without a word. The gesture was firm, careful, unlike anything she had ever known. "The ranch is 2 hours from here," he said, mounting behind her. "After the bend in the river, there's no more town. No law." A shiver ran through Clara, and it wasn't from the cold. "What if they come after us?" she asked. Elias pulled the reins, urging the horse forward. "They will," he replied. "The difference is, they won't reach you." The path was narrow, lined with twisted trees and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The sound of hooves blended with the rain, until another noise emerged. A snap, then another. Elias stopped the horse abruptly and pulled Clara down, shielding her with his own body in the very next instant. A gunshot echoed, striking the tree behind them. "Stay on the ground," he ordered, his voice hard as steel. 2 men stepped out of the woods. One of them was familiar. The other, just another man working for whoever paid best. "You can't take her," one of them shouted. "She owes a debt." Elias stood up slowly, tall, imposing. The rain streaming down his face softened nothing. It only made him more frightening. "The debt is paid," he said. "Now turn back, while you still can." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Elias drew his gun. He didn't fire. He didn't need to. His name was enough. The men backed away, cursing, disappearing into the trees like frightened rats. Clara was shaking. Elias returned to her, knelt down, and removed his own coat, covering her carefully. "They won't stop," she whispered. I know," he answered. "That's why you had to leave the town tonight." When the ranch finally appeared on the horizon, large, isolated, surrounded by land and silence, Clara realized something she had never felt before. Fear mixed with hope. But inside the house, under the dim light of the lantern, she would still hear something that would make her heart stop. And it wasn't coming from outside. The rain began before they even left the town. Heavy, cold, as if the sky itself had decided to wash the valley's sins away that night. Clara walked beside Elias, the borrowed hood barely covering her hair, her feet still feeling the wet ground beneath them. Each step away from the saloon felt like being torn from an entire lifetime, even if that life had never truly been hers. Elias's horse was large, restless. He helped her up without a word. The gesture was firm, careful, unlike anything she had ever known. "The ranch is 2 hours from here," he said, mounting behind her. "After the bend in the river, there's no more town. No law." A shiver ran through Clara, and it wasn't from the cold. "What if they come after us?" she asked. Elias pulled the reins, urging the horse forward. They will," he replied. "The difference is, they won't reach you." The path was narrow, lined with twisted trees and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The sound of hooves blended with the rain, until another noise emerged. A snap, then another. Elias stopped the horse abruptly and pulled Clara down, shielding her with his own body in the very next instant. A gunshot echoed, striking the tree behind them. "Stay on the ground," he ordered, his voice hard as steel. 2 men stepped out of the woods. One of them was familiar. The other, just another man working for whoever paid best. "You can't take her," one of them shouted. "She owes a debt." Elias stood up slowly, tall, imposing. The rain streaming down his face softened nothing. It only made him more frightening. "The debt is paid," he said. "Now turn back, while you still can." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Elias drew his gun. He didn't fire. He didn't need to. His name was enough. The men backed away, cursing, disappearing into the trees like frightened rats. Clara was shaking. Elias returned to her, knelt down, and removed his own coat, covering her carefully. "They won't stop," she whispered. I know," he answered. "That's why you had to leave the town tonight." When the ranch finally appeared on the horizon, large, isolated, surrounded by land and silence, Clara realized something she had never felt before. Fear mixed with hope. But inside the house, under the dim light of the lantern, she would still hear something that would make her heart stop. and it wasn't coming from outside. The sound of the gun being cocked echoed again, closer. Clara felt her body turn to ice, but she didn't scream. She didn't run. Something inside her, maybe the same instinct that had kept her alive for so many years, made her stand firm behind Elias. He moved toward the door in absolute silence. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice deep. Controlled. No answer, only the wind, and footsteps slowly moving away, like someone teasing fate. Elias flung the door open. 3 men stood there, their faces uncovered. They didn't need to hide. They were from the valley, living messages. "She can't stay," the one in front said. "The town has decided." Clara felt her blood boil. No town had defended her when she went hungry. No town had cared when everything was taken from her. Elias stepped forward. "The town decides nothing inside my fences." The man laughed. "You can't buy everyone's silence, Crowe." That's when Clara did something unexpected. She stepped out from behind him. "I'm not a burden," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am not a debt. I'm not anyone's property." The men exchanged glances, surprised. "If you want war," she continued, "you'll have to go through me too." The silence that followed was heavy. Elias slowly turned his face toward her, not to scold her, but to acknowledge her. "You heard her," he said to the men. "Now leave." They hesitated. Fatal mistake. Elias raised the gun. A single shot, fired into the air, split the night like thunder, not to wound, but to make one thing clear. There would be no negotiation. The men backed away, cursing, promising they would return. When the door finally closed, Clara felt her legs give out. Elias caught her before she fell. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured. I should have," she replied, taking a deep breath. "I've spent my whole life silent." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then know this," he said at last. "From today on, no one will silence you here." Outside, in the distance, a horse neighed. The valley was still watching, and that night was only the beginning of the most dangerous choice Clara had ever made. The night passed without sleep. Clara remained seated near the fire, watching the low flames dance, like thoughts that refused to settle. Across the table, Elias cleaned his gun in silence, not out of habit, but out of necessity. Out here, everything had a reason. "They'll come back," she said, breaking the silence. "They always do," he replied. She took a deep breath. "Then we need rules." Elias lifted his eyes, attentive. "What kind of rules?" "Clear rules." Clara straightened her posture. "I'm not someone you need to protect all the time, and I won't be used as a weakness against you." Elias stayed silent for a few seconds. "First rule," he said at last, "you don't leave the ranch alone." "Second," she added, "I work. I don't hide." A faint smile almost appeared on his face. Almost. "Third," Elias said, "between us there are no lies." Clara felt the weight of that rule more than any other. "And the deal?" she asked, her voice lower. "Is it still just a deal?" The fire cracked loudly, as if answering for him. "It was," Elias said. But deals change when 2 people choose each other. Every single day. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was too full. Clara felt something dangerous growing in her chest. It wasn't love yet. It was respect. Safety. Something she had never had. "Elias," she began. Before she could continue, a horse came racing toward them. The sound arrived far too fast. Elias jumped to his feet. "Back," he ordered. A man fell from the horse, barely conscious, covered in blood and dust. "They're gathering," he managed to say. Mercer bought men. A lot of men. Clara felt the world shrink again. Elias clenched his fists. "Then it's war," he said without hesitation. And in that instant, Clara understood something terrifying. She was no longer running from danger. She was staying, to face it. The man could barely stay on his feet. Elias laid him down carefully near the table, while Clara fetched water and pressed the wound as best she could. Blood stained the floor of the ranch, marking something that had been decided long ago. "Mercer gathered men from 3 towns, the man said, struggling for breath. "They say they're coming at dawn. Not just for you, but for everything." Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't just about her. It was about the ranch, the land. what Elias had built through years of silence and resistance. "You need to leave," Elias said suddenly, turning to Clara. She froze. "What?" "I'm sending you with him. There's still time to get out of the valley." Her chest burned. "Are you sending me away?" "I'm keeping you alive," he replied, too harsh. "Mercer wants you. If you stay, you become a target." She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. I spent my whole life running just to survive." She stepped closer. "I won't start living by running now." Elias looked away. "You don't understand what they do." "I do," she said. "I understand what they do to those who are alone, and I'm not alone anymore." The silence between them was thick, heavy with everything still unsaid. "If you stay," Elias began. "I'm staying," she cut in. "With you." Outside, the sky slowly began to lighten. It wasn't the light of hope. It was the warning that time had run out. Elias nodded once. "Then listen carefully," he said. "When the attack starts, you'll stay in the old barn. There's a passage underneath. If everything goes wrong—" "It won't," she said. He held her face for a moment, not in possession, but in restrained farewell. "You changed everything," he murmured. Clara felt her heart race. In the distance, the sound of horses began to echo through the valley. Dawn was coming, and with it, the war that would decide who would remain standing. The first gunshot echoed before the sun even broke the horizon. Then another, and another. The valley woke up at war. Clara ran toward the barn just as Elias had ordered, but every step felt like a betrayal of everything inside her. The thunder of hooves, the shouts, the dry crack of wood being struck by bullets. This was no longer a threat. It was an invasion. She hid beneath the barn's passageway, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might give her away. Dust fell from the ceiling with every shot. "Elias," she whispered, not knowing if he could hear her. Outside, Elias fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. He defended every inch of land as if it were the last piece of the world. But there were too many of them, more than he had expected. A scream cut through the air. Clara recognized the voice. Desperation defeated fear. She stepped out. In the yard, she saw Elias surrounded. Blood ran down his arm, but he was still standing. Then Mercer appeared, smiling like a man who finally felt in control. "I warned you," he said. "Everything you love becomes a weakness." Clara moved before she could think. "No," she said, her voice loud and steady. "It becomes courage." Everyone turned toward her. Mercer laughed. "Well, look at that. The Barefoot girl thinks she's a queen now. That's when Clara did something no one expected." "You stole this land," she said. "I have the papers." "My father died because of it." "And you know it." Mercer's smile vanished.
"Shut up!"
No," she answered. No more silence. The men hesitated. Murmurs spread. That truth, spoken there, in the middle of dust and blood, began to crack Mercer's authority. Elias looked at her stunned. "Clara," he murmured. "I told you I wouldn't be your weakness," she replied. "I'm your ally," a gunshot echoed. But it didn't come from Mercer. It came from one of his own men. Chaos erupted. And in the middle of that confusion, Clara understood. The truth carried more power than any weapon. But the war wasn't over yet. The silence after the chaos was deafening. Dust still hung in the air as Mercer's last men retreated, confused, wounded without leadership. His authority had shattered there, not by force but by truth spoken out loud. Mercer dropped to his knees, not defeated by a weapon, but exposed. "You took everything from me," he snarled, staring at Clara. She stepped forward, hands trembling, but her gaze unyielding. "You took everything from me first." Before anyone could react, a gunshot rang out from where no one expected. Elias fell. Clara's world stopped. She ran to him, dropping to her knees in the blood-stained dirt. No, stay with me," she whispered, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest. Elias struggled to breathe. Every breath was a battle. "You were stronger than I ever was," he said with effort. "You brought light, where all I had was war." Clara's tears fell without control. "You promised you wouldn't leave me alone." He tried to smile. "I promised to give you a home," he murmured. "And I did. The men of the valley watched in silence. Many lowered their heads. Others turned away, ashamed. The ranch, wounded, was still standing. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. Clara felt her heart shatter. But then he took another breath, weak alive. "It's not over yet," he whispered. Help arrived at dawn. Mercer was taken away in chains, screaming threats that no longer frightened anyone. Clara stayed by Elias the entire time, holding his hand, choosing to stay. But as the day rose, she knew the final choice was still to come, because loving someone like Elias Crowe required the courage to face a future that had not yet been written. Elias survived, not by luck, but because there was still something he had to fulfill. The days that followed were slow. The ranch fell into silence as he recovered, and Clara remained by his side, like someone guarding a fragile flame against the wind. She slept little, left even less. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to prove anything to anyone, only to remain. When Elias finally opened his eyes clearly, the first thing he saw was Clara sitting there, steady, whole. "You stayed," he murmured. "I chose to," she replied. The valley changed after that morning. The men who once whispered now lowered their heads. The stolen lands began to return to their rightful owners. Clara's name stopped being spoken in whispers and began to be spoken with respect. Months later, the ranch was no longer just a fortress. It was home. Children began to run through the yard. Hands helped where there had once been fear. And Clara, barefoot by choice now, walked the land like someone who finally belonged to herself. On a golden afternoon, Elias found her near the fence, watching the horizon. "Do you remember the agreement?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I remember." He stepped closer. "That was only the beginning. What I want now is to walk beside you. Not by promise, by decision." Clara took his hand. "I don't need to be saved anymore," she said. "But I choose to stay." Elias nodded. There, in the heart of the Old West, something was born that no one could destroy. A home built not on fear, but on choice. And the valley was never the same again, because when a woman refuses to stay silent, and a man learns to love without domination, the whole world shifts its place.